Hello, fellow audio nerd. My question, in your opinion, what do you consider to be a vintage microphone? For most items, people say 50 years old, but I'd argue for video games, that number could be far lower. So I wonder if for microphones, is there an age as well, or is there more to it than that? A wonderful person was advertising a 97 NT1 as vintage, and it got me curious what your thoughts were. Not that the term really matters in the end, it's the sound that counts. Thanks, Taurus. Taurus, thank you very much for the question. What serendipitous timing? Is that the correct usage of serendipitous? Serendipity? I don't know. What I'm trying to say is, what perfect timing? Because I just had a conversation on this exact topic last night in my Discord's voice chat. And the reason we had that conversation is a set of microphones. The Samson C02s. If you've watched this podcast for any amount of time, or if you are in the Podcastage Discord server, you will know Eldest Bro, a member of the Discord server, a mod at the Discord server, and a frequent contributor to the Ask Bander segment. Why am I bringing Eldest up? Eldest has the C02s, and he has been asking me to review them for years at this point. I bought these in 2015 or 2016, and as soon as Eldest started asking me to review them, just to mess with him, I told him that I would not review the C02s until they are officially vintage. And because of that, we needed to look up what vintage entailed. And I found two main answers between vintage. First, antique was 100 years or older. And then they said we would classify vintage anywhere from 40 to 100. But then I found a second site, and it was called a Retro Kid. That's how you know it's trustworthy, because they say Retro Kid. They said 20 years. Anything over 20 years is vintage. So I started thinking, I think between 20 and 30 years would be fine to classify some audio gear as vintage. And the reason I'm saying that is there are certain types of gear that age much quicker. And not in the terms of the quality of the gear or the longevity of it, but in terms of how quickly outdated it becomes. I think an audio interface that's 20 years old is bordering on an antique. Some folks may disagree. Maybe there are some audio interfaces from 2001 that are still the cream of the crop, just aces, just perfect. Maybe I'm unaware of them. But I imagine an audio interface from 2001 is kind of garbage compared to an interface from 2021. I imagine the quality of everything in an interface from today is better than a 2001. Microphones, on the other hand, are slightly different. The SM7B has been out for almost 50 years, and you can still buy it. It doesn't seem vintage. If you buy a 1970s SM7, I would classify that as vintage. I think 30 plus years for a microphone would be vintage. 20 plus years for an audio interface would be vintage. Maybe 40 years for a preamp, because preamps don't change much at all. That technology is pretty consistent. Although now I'm just determining how outdated stuff becomes. I guess it would need to be consistent across all categories of audio equipment. I think 30 years would be fine to classify something as vintage. So that 97 wouldn't be vintage until, would it be 2037 or 2027? 2027. 2027 is when that would be vintage. Why did I think it would be 2037? I'm an idiot. This is why Excel is the greatest thing ever. I hope that answered your question. 30 years. That's my final answer. 30 years. How long? Until we get to review the Samson C02s. Somebody, if anybody, Samson, if you are watching, I want to talk to Samson. Fly me to the moon. Please tell me the official release date of the Samson C02s so that I may determine what date is the earliest that I may review them when they are officially vintage. Samson. Somebody get me in touch with Samson.